great to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Chris. Hey. Glad to have you here.
All right, Chris, so thanks for being here. And we want to jump into drones in just a minute. But first off, you are known for your books in part, in addition to your past role at Wired magazine. And you've kind of hit these on a 3-year cycle. The Long Tail was published in 2006, Free in 2009, and The Makers in 2012. So you're due here in 2015. If you were going to be writing a book for 2015, what would be the big mega trend, not just drones, but the big mega trend that you would want to explore along the lines of what you've done in the past?
You sound like my agent. Well, so I decided to start a company instead of writing a third book. Books are a big pursuit, and you can't do too many things at the same time. The big mega trend. Well, this is a little bit of a lazy answer, but those 3 books are all the same book. The Long Tail was just really my observation in '94 that the internet's infinite capacity meant that we're completely changing the elements of choice. We could choose anything can get out there, and that suddenly consumer demand could surface, and we could see what people really wanted rather than what just happened to be on the shelves of Walmart. Free is the business model of the Long Tail, and Makers is the long tail of things.
Yes.
So the question is, what's the fourth element of the long tail played out? I think Makers was really about the tools of this new maker movement. But in fact, what they're making is every bit as exciting. So Kickstarter, for example, is the business, the crowdfunding of the maker movement. And what we're seeing right now is what I call the peace dividend of the smartphone wars, which is that you did that exercise with the phones. That was a great line, by the way. Do BlackBerries even light up? But Moore's law is moving faster in our pockets than it has ever moved in anywhere else, in any other part of technology in history. What's going on with MEMS sensors, GPS cameras, just the amazing improvements of the cameras in our phones, the batteries, the ARM processors. These things are supercomputers right now. And we know how much impact they've had with smartphones, but those components are now available for everybody else. So when you look at the adjacent industries, robotics, so our drones are enabled by smartphone components. 10 years ago, impossible, unobtainium. $10,000 military, classified sensors, and today you can buy them in Radio Shack. The GPS, the cameras, we just use smartphone parts and put them in different ways. So when you look at wearables, that peace dividend of the smartphone wars. The Internet of Things, peace dividend of the smartphone wars. What's going on with autonomous cars and drones and big data and sensors, all of that. CubeSats, all smartphone components. So I think I don't know whether that's a book, but that's the big trend.
Yeah, very good.
So you had mentioned that you started a company instead of writing another book, and you left your job as editor of Wired, where you worked for a number of years. What's that transition been like for you to move from an author, writer, journalist to a entrepreneur who's not just starting an internet company, starting a manufacturing company with a drone maker?
On one level, it's sort of the same. We now have about a 200-person company, and at Wired, there's about a 200-person company. I was the boss of we had products that we shipped, web content on a daily basis and magazines on a monthly basis. There was a factory, it's called a printing plant. We had project teams, we had roadmaps, and we had daily meetings. So in many ways, it's similar. What's different, of course, is that there's no existing infrastructure to build on. In the media industry, I didn't have to build a printing plant. I didn't even have to go visit a printing plant to say nothing of understand how it works. Today, we have to build these things from scratch. We have a factory in Tijuana. By the way, if you're looking for a great name for a band, Tijuana Drone Factory. Just saying. We have other factories in Shenzhen, one coming up in Shanghai, and so now, I really spend my day understanding yield rates and, pick and place machines and X-ray inspection and supply chain management and vendor selections, and, I didn't have to do that with paper and ink.
You like that challenge? Is that fun for you?
That's not the funnest part. That's a necessary element of the job. The fun part is invention.
Yeah.
So I think that, in many ways, running a team and motivating them to do something that's never been done before, that has impact, that resonates with customers, that's the same. That's just leadership and management. The actual level of sort of granular detail you have to get into in entrepreneurship has been a bit of a surprise, and a great learning curve for me. I know way more about LED yield rates than I should know at this point.
Right.
So we have up on screen here, this is the Iris Plus, if I'm not mistaken. Tell us about this device and how it fits into your vision for drones and the future of technology.
So this is our first consumer drone, which was just launched this week. So a drone is an autonomous, is a vehicle capable of autonomy. So we've had radio control helicopters and planes for 50 years. Actually, interestingly, Marilyn Monroe got her start before Hollywood building drones for the military in the early, I guess, late 40s. So what I mentioned before, these sensors and computers and GPS, et cetera, what this allows us to do is to move beyond piloting and to let software and computers do the work of sort of keeping an aircraft in the air and going from point A to point B. And that allows you, much like an autopilot does in a jet plane. I mean, our friend from Alaska was mentioning that we should be interested in the connection between drones and airliners. Well, airliners are drones. For like 99% of that flight, it's on autopilot. You know, the pilots we're very glad they're there, and we're, you know, for takeoff and landing, but by and large, they don't fly aircraft, and we don't fly aircraft. We haven't flown aircraft for a long time, but at the consumer level, that technology was not available. So why would anybody want autonomy? And I think we're going to talk about that in the next panel, but flying aircraft is hard. So let me, quick question here. How many people here have tried to fly a radio control aircraft? How many people here have crashed a radio control aircraft?
We did it at an event once. It was sad. It was really sad.
Humans should not operate heavy machinery drunk or not. This is hard. It's super hard. We're not good at it, and we shouldn't have to be. If all we want to do is put a GoPro in the air and get the ultimate selfie, of capture or tell the story of our lives with sort of Hollywood-like perspective, let the software do the work. And so what this does is this will follow you. You know, it's no sticks. It's phones. It's controlled by your Pebble watch. You just basically press the button and then say, follow me with your watch. It gets up, and then you go about your fun life, and it just follows you around through the park, keeping the camera on you. You wanted to have a droney, that's our selfie that kind of starts in front of you, then zooms out and pulls back, and see it's perspective, one button on your phone. No sticky, no skills, no crashing, it just works.
Got it. And how much does the Iris Plus cost?
$750.
$750. So it's at the lower end of your range in terms of your product lineup?
I mean, without GoPro, we assume you have your own GoPro.
Yeah, understood. So talk about the societal implications of this, because when you start talking about drones flying over 50 feet overhead, taking selfies, it raises not only regulatory issues, but also privacy issues. And we're going to be getting into this in just a little bit with Chad Copeland, a photographer for National Geographic, who's pioneered the use of drones in extreme photography. But I want to get your take. Regulation and societal implications.
Yeah, the story I love this week was with the guy in New Jersey who ended up shooting his neighbor's drone that was hovering over his house with a shotgun. So there are certain perceptions out there that exist around drones that I think that gets into some of these regulatory issues.
Yeah, well, I think that probably has less to do with the drone, more to do with the relations between neighbors. If he was sitting in a tree taking pictures, over the backyard fence, then, well, let's hope he wouldn't have used the shotgun. So there's basically two big markets for drones. The main one today is a consumer market, and that's basically putting GoPros in the air. This is the golden age of videography. YouTube created this notion that we could share videos of our lives with, that were increasingly good and sort of set the bar. GoPros allowed us to take those videos, and now drones allowed us to take those videos like the way Hollywood would in the air. That is called recreational use by the FAA. It is allowed as long as you stay under 400 feet within visual line of sight, away from congested areas. So like that backyard thing was actually illegal, to say nothing of immoral, unethical, and as it turns out, dangerous. So that's commercial use, and that's fine. That's consumer use, recreational use. Commercial use is not currently allowed in the United States. It is allowed in other countries. And commercial use would be the much more interesting, or let's say bigger uses of drones, which is big data, agriculture, construction. So this thing right here, which has a GoPro on it, we're pitching it to consumers, but the reality is this is also a 3D scanner. you can push one button and this will fly around a building. So you know the way a 3D scanner works, you know, for a small object, you put an object on a turntable, and the turntable rotates while a laser or a camera shoots a beam at it, and structured light, and cameras record it, and then picks up all the geometries, and you get a 3D model that you can 3D print. This does just the opposite. This goes out to the real world, and rather than rotating a building, it flies around the building in these perfect circles, taking pictures, which we then get uploaded to the Autodesk cloud and turned into a 3D model. So it can 3D scan anything. So just imagine if we could digitize the world that way. Imagine if you go to a construction site and every day get a digital model of the progress of the construction site that you can compare to the underlying CAD model and see the progress and deviations from the model. It's also a 2D scanner. So the camera tilts down, and now it can map crops or any structure, stitch it together and create topological maps that can also work in. You can also do an image analysis and spot, you know, water leakages or disease or things like that. So agriculture, construction, the two biggest industries in the world, and these devices are a way to bring big data to those industries. The FAA in a couple years is going to create a rulemaking process that will allow that. And outside the United States, it's already allowed. We've got a group with Amazon and Google and GoPro called the Small UAV Coalition that we announced yesterday. I'm the chairman of that, and that is designed to work with the FAA to come up with a path to allow these kind of vehicles to reach their potential in the commercial space.
That's very good. So your business has, in fact, attracted quite a bit of attention from a variety of folks, including this gentleman who invested in 3D robotics. This is Richard Branson, I believe, flying one of your drones, if I'm not mistaken.
I love how he doesn't have shoes on.
Yes.
Can you explain that? Is that just his style, or?
This is Necker Island. This is his beautiful island in the British Virgin Islands, and this is the Great House at the top of Necker Island. It's his island in the British Virgin Islands. What part of no shoes doesn't make sense?
So obviously Richard Branson is involved in a variety of ventures, but it's notable that he in particular has taken an interest in your business. What is your business model? How do you plan to make money from drones?
We sell drones.
Yes.
Next question. No.
Yes.
It's not the free economy here on
well,
drones.
it actually is. I mean, this is, you kind of look at it, long-tail free and makers are all embodied in this thing. We're an open innovation platform. So our underlying core is, as you mentioned before, we're the Android of UAV. So we're a full stack company, essentially software. We go from the camera to the cloud. And it is you know, a ton of software. These are the most advanced robots you can buy. But we're an open source. We started as a community, DIY drones. That community created a series of projects creating the software. They're all open source. And so that's the free. We give away the bits. We give away all the intellectual property. This is the largest platform in the world because it's adopted by so many other companies the way Android would. So how do we make money? We give away the bits and we sell the atoms. If you want the technology, if you want the software, if you want to use it yourself, go for it. You want to make your own, fine. If you want us to do it for you, we'll happily stick it in a beautiful drone. It'll work right out of the box. $750, please.
How big do you expect 3D robotics to be as a business in 3, 4, 5 years?
We're closing in on 20 million per year right now.
20 million in revenue per year.
Yeah. You know, we're growing more than 100% a year. We have two big competitors, a big Chinese company called DJI and a French company called Parrot. Between the three of us, we're $1 billion a year right now, and it's growing by at least 100% a year.
Okay. And where do you expect that to go as an industry over the next decade? How big are drones going to get?
Well, putting aside the military stuff, and think of it like the PC. There was the mainframe business, call that the military-industrial complex, making military drones at millions of dollars each. And then there's the PC, and that's us. And so what we're seeing, so the military business with drones is like $20 billion. It's huge. Pay no attention to that. It's like, you know, these are flying very high. They're carrying weapons. We have no interest in that space. We don't even sell to the military. We won't sell to the military. Then there's the PC. Then there's the democratization of this technology, the long tail of drones, if you will, to find all these new applications, the peaceful civilian, you know, positive applications for drones that the military just wasn't going to do. And that's the GoPros, the creativity, the agriculture, you know, the digitizing the world. So the military market's like 18 billion. The consumer market's now like 1 billion. And then we're about to see the launch of the commercial market, which I think will be bigger than the both of them combined.
Yeah, you've compared this to the PC revolution in some ways. At what phase are we in the drones analogy to the PC revolution?
I was going to say that until last week we were at the Apple II, but with the launch of Iris Plus, we're at the Mac.
We're at the Mac. Where's Windows in all this? Come on. you're in Seattle.
Well, it's a hardware thing. So.
It's right, exactly.
Well, we're going to get back into the drone talk a lot more when we invite Chad Copeland up here in a little bit. But you also have a lot of other interests before you got into the drone making business. And something that maybe the audience doesn't know a lot about is that you started a blog called Geek Dad. And in some ways, there's some tie-ins to how you started your current company with that. But Todd and I are both parents of young kids under the age of 5. So what advice do you give for us or others out in the crowd that want to get their kids involved in science and engineering and technology?
Well, I feel a little awkward giving advice since I have failed so abjectly in this respect. I have 5 kids, and they're all spaced 18 months apart. So I feel your pain. I was trained as a scientist, a computational physicist. My wife is a molecular geneticist.
So Todd, we're sunk as journalists.
Yes.
Yeah. We have had almost no success in getting the kids interested. I mean, I was the editor of Wired, and my kids think that's geeky nerd stuff. I mean, it's like we brought Steve Wozniak came over for dinner and did card tricks for the kids, and the kids were kind of bored and wanted to watch movies. It's just, I don't know, I would just not, anyway. So I started Geek Dad as an exercise in finding projects that were, science and technology projects that were fun for kids and fun for adults, as opposed to one and not the other. Because there was like, I cannot play Candyland again, not doing that anymore, and they don't want to build robots with me. And so it was like, what would work? What would be that right combination? And I basically, I started with things like flying robots and drones. And my whole exercise getting into drones started with me putting Lego Mindstorms in a radio control plane to get the kids, because it's very hard to impress kids with robots because they've seen Transformers.
Yeah.
And competing with CG.
Yeah.
Competing with CG, real robots go, bonk. And Transformers go, boom.
And transform.
And
cool
transform.
Yeah.
So they're like, Dad, seriously? That's all you got? So I said, well, what if it could fly? And they're like, So I built a Lego drone now in the Lego Museum in Billund, Denmark, the world's first Lego UAV, which, by the way, it turns out that drones or autopilots are considered cruise missile controllers and that technically export controlled, so I weaponized Lego.
Well, wow, okay. Don't let that get back to Copenhagen.
Yeah. DC was more what I was worried about. Anyway, they lost interest. I went down the rabbit hole, but then we set up the site, Geek Dad, which was designed to find these projects and sort of exhibit best practice. It's now it was taken over by fantastic people, including Ken Denby, the editor. It's now been 3 books, and it's I occasionally refer to them. The problem is that when you start a site like this explicitly to help parents and children work together to understand science and technology, your kids will suspect that everything you do is actually for the blog and book. So every project, every Saturday, I was like, let's 3D print something. They're like, are you going to put this on the blog? It's like, no. Are you going to take pictures? No. And it's like they literally, they suspect my motives now.
Yeah. What do you think of the state of science education in the U.S. right now?
It's actually getting a lot better. My oldest kids are now in high school, and they go to Berkeley High, a public school, and they did synthetic biology in freshman year of a public high school. Synthetic biology, just to be clear, they go to the internet to something called Genome Compiler. They use basically a CAD program to select DNA strands, put them together to create new features and species like you would Lego, but with like biology, send them to a gene synthesis lab, get the DNA, synthesized DNA back, inject it into E. coli that's been shocked chemically, and put them in a petri dish, and you've got like a new species before the 2nd month of freshman year in public high school.
A little bit more innovative than the fart machine we saw earlier, I guess. Yeah.
It's all a continuum. And the bacteria did smell pretty bad, so there's that. Yes. We're now seeing 3D printers emerging in schools. We're seeing digital design. Things like Minecraft. Robotics teams are flourishing around the country. So I actually think that there was, when I was in high school, we had, a workshop and industrial arts and, things like that. And there was this opportunity to make things, and then it all got wiped out as manufacturing left the country and budgets were cut. And I think it's now coming back, and it's coming back in a more digital form between Learn to Code Day, which is great.
Yeah.
Beginnings of 3D printers, robotics teams, and just what's going on in biology. That regular biology classes can now move beyond the Bunsen burner and the esters and actually do something that feels digital and modern and biotechy.
Now, before we continue on with the drone discussion, I wanted to go back a little bit to Free and the Long Tail, just because those were iconic books that I think brought to the fore issues that have really defined the next generations or the next decades. One of the costs of Free is privacy, and we've seen that come out over the last 2 years in ways both commercial and governmental, through companies collecting information about us for advertising purposes, and also the government surveilling its citizens.
And the citizens surveilling the government.
Oh, let's hear about that. I want to hear about that. But I wonder, is the cost worth it? Is the cost that we pay in terms of our privacy worth the free that we're getting as consumers or businesses?
So, obviously I get asked about this a lot. And yeah, I just want to, the main point here is that there is not like one standard of privacy that we all subscribe to. I think privacy is a matter of personal choice. In Europe, they have like, sort of regional-wide privacy laws. And here in the United States, that's not the way it works, actually. In the United States, privacy is regulated on a kind of local and regional basis, based on what's called a community standard of reasonable expectation of privacy. So, for example, let's just take the air that you mentioned. So I live in Berkeley. Berkeley is being Berkeley, has, Code Pink wants to pass a no drone zone rule. Perfectly normal, that's kind of a Berkeley thing to do. Well, at some point along that thing, they say, okay, absolutely, no drone zone, invasion of privacy. Right, let's move it through to legislation, and at some point the lawyer says, you do realize we don't control the air. The national airspace in the United States is controlled at a federal level by the FAA, whereas privacy is controlled at a regional level by cities and towns. So there's no jurisdiction. There's a complete jurisdictional gap. The feds have no mandate over privacy. The locals have no mandate over the air. What are you going to do? So this is one example where our system doesn't lend itself to this one-size-fits-all thing. Now let's get back to sort of what should privacy be. Well, again, it falls into the reasonable expectation. That's the legal precedents in America have all been around this, and reasonable expectation changes over time. So, once upon a time, you had a reasonable expectation to be privately sunbathed nude in your backyard. Right? And then your neighbors built like a 3-story house, and then you didn't have that reasonable expectation anymore. And then satellites started flying over, and then Google's planes, which, by the way, if you look at your backyard, you're getting higher and higher resolution views of your backyard. And so, and meanwhile, their cell phones proliferate, and once you had a reasonable expectation of privacy in a situation like this, now we know there's all these phones out there, with the exception of the BlackBerrys, that have cameras. Just kidding. Of course, BlackBerrys have cameras. So that line moves. Reasonable expectation moves, and what I expect is different than what my kids expect, and is different from what their kids will expect. So I think fundamentally, all we can do is inform people about what their expectations should be in any particular situation regarding privacy. How private can they expect this to be, and give them a dial to try to set their own standards as this feels right to them.
That's just great stuff. All right, Chris, thank you for being here, and we're going to keep you around for our next segment because we want to continue the discussion of drones.